about, Jesus begins by talking about something they would all agree on because he's the master communicator. He decides to talk about sheep, and he tells them a parable. And if you've never been to our church before or you're new to church, here's what you need to know. A parable is simply something that's untrue that illustrates something that is true. A parable is a story that never happened, totally fictitious, but it's used to introduce people to a very emotional topic or oftentimes to a subject that's difficult to understand. And so instead of just addressing what he wanted to address, Jesus steps way back and he decides to get this very diverse audience all on the same page. And he asked them a question that they would all have the same answer to. He's so brilliant. He says this: suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one. Jesus begins with a common emotion. Everybody's lost something, and everybody knows what they do when they lose something of value. Suppose you had 900 sheep and you lose one of them. Doesn't you leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And for the first time in their lifetime, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law and the tax gatherers and the sinners all nod in the same direction. They've never agreed on anything in their lives, and they're like, this makes me nervous, but yes, that's what all of us would do. And Jesus said, and then when you found that lost sheep, wouldn't you tell the people that you had told you were looking for your lost sheep? And nervously, they all nod in the same direction again. And then wouldn't you rejoice because you'd found what was lost? And everybody nods in the same direction. And before they can ask a question or go anywhere, he said, did you know there is more rejoicing in heaven over something that was lost being found than everything that was found that was never lost? And before they can put it together, he sees some women in the audience and he says, and did you know, isn't it true, women, that if you lost a precious coin, and it's a coin that we can't fully understand how precious it was because it was part of something that was even larger and more precious to them, if you lost one of those precious coins, isn't it true you take all the furniture out of the house and you would sweep until you found it? And all the women are going, the good women and the bad women are going, yep. And all the husbands are going, yep, that's what she would do. In fact, I'd have to come home early to help move the furniture because she would not go to sleep until she found that precious coin. Because when you lose something precious, it is your undivided, and it has your undivided attention. You are more passionate about what you've lost than what you've never misplaced to begin with. And they all agree because everybody's lost something. And he said, did you know that God is more excited about something that a lost sinner, a lost person returning to fellowship with him than he is about the 99 who were never lost to begin with? And before they can put all that together, then he dives into the familiar part of this teaching. He says, let me tell you one more. There was a man, and he had 2 sons, an older son and a younger son, and Jesus understood birth order before anybody was talking about birth order. He said the older son was a behavior, and the second born was a misbehavior. Just wondering, how many firstborn sons in the room, or at any of our church, or at home, you can raise your hand by yourself, firstborn, isn't that true? Weren't you like the behavior? In fact, your younger brother's not even in church anywhere, is he? So yeah, because he's, just kidding, right? So he understood birth order. There was the older firstborn, I'm gonna do everything right, and there was a younger son. And then this is a made-up story, it's not true, and Jesus drives it to almost a ridiculous extreme to make his point. And he said, and so the younger son, the younger brother, the second born, comes to the father, and I'm gonna say it to you in terms that would sort of raise the emotion that it raised for Jesus' audience. And essentially he said this, Dad, I wish you would go ahead and die so I could get my inheritance, but you just won't seem to die. So would you pretend like you're dead and just go ahead and give me my inheritance now so I can do whatever I want to with it? Now, everybody in Jesus' audience was equally offended. The Pharisees with sons, the tax gatherers with sons, the teachers of the law who had children, and the sinners who had, everybody in Jesus' audience. This was so offensive in any culture, but especially this kind of first century Jewish culture. And then because Jesus is making up this story and it can go in any direction he wants to, he says, and you won't believe this, but the father said, you know what, son? I'm going to do that. And the father began to sell things and trade things and buy things so he could begin to split up everything he owned. And he gave the younger son what the younger son would have gotten if the father had suddenly died. And I imagine you could have heard a pin drop in Jesus' audience. Who would do such a thing? And Jesus went on to say, and the son hung around for a while, but then he decided, this little town's too small for me. So he liquidated everything he could liquidate, loaded up as much money as he could take with him, and whatever he couldn't liquidate, and he headed off to a distant country where nobody would know who he was and nobody would know what he was up to. And you've heard this story. And then he bought into a lifestyle he couldn't really afford for very long. The little Greek word that's used there can mean lavish, it can mean wild, it can mean, it was just bigger than he could afford. And so before long, at a much shorter time frame than he anticipated, he used up everything it had taken his father a lifetime to amass. And again, the anger and the sense of offense in Jesus' audience was unanimous. Everybody felt the same way. And Jesus said, and then it got worse. A famine came to that part of the country. And this young man not only ran out of money, he needed a job. And he couldn't find a job. And then he got fired from a job. And then he finally found another job. And this young Jewish boy, the only job he could find was feeding pigs. And at that point, everybody in Jesus' audience is like, yes! He's getting what he deserves. In fact, they're nervous. They've agreed with each other throughout this teaching. Where is this going? And then he becomes so hungry, Jesus said, the only thing he could think about eating was what the pigs ate. And now Jesus has driven this story in a Jewish culture to the ultimate extreme. A young Jewish boy taking care of pigs, thinking about eating what pigs eat. And if Jesus had stopped the story there, this would have been a great story. In fact, everybody in Jesus' audience would have gone home and shared it around the dinner table that night. Kids, let me tell you a story I heard today. Here's what happens if you don't obey your father. Here's what happens if you disobey your father. Here's what God is like. You reap what you sow. You get what's coming to you. What goes around comes around. This was a great story. And Jesus had everybody on the edge of their seat, both audiences. And then he kept going. And he said this. When he, the young son, came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out, and I'm going to go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned. I'm not a mistaker. I'm a sinner. This wasn't an accident. This was horrible. I've sinned against heaven, God, and I've sinned against you. And to let you know I've really come to grips with my sin, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and he went to his father. And everybody in Jesus' audience is going, this is going to be good. I mean, I thought the story should have ended and he, fed pigs the rest of his life. But this is even better because now he's going to get what he has coming to him. And everybody in that audience knew what this son deserved. And everybody in that audience knew what they would do if it were his or her son. And so the son has a story. And he's not going to be asked to be returned to his position as a son. He just wants a better job. And he knows his father treats his servants better than his boss was treating him. Then Jesus, who's making this whole thing up in order to make a very emotional point that no one would agree with if he'd started with the point to begin with, says this. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with. And if he had turned to his audience instead and was filled with, fill in the blank, everybody in Jesus' audience no doubt would have said, anger. 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 Because how dare the son humiliate the father this way? Anger. That's what you're supposed to feel when someone takes advantage of you and then comes back. And besides, we don't even know why he's coming back. He knows we know because we know the story, but the father doesn't know. And this is about to get good. And when a father who sees a son who's done what the son has done, there's only one thing to be filled with: righteous indignation. Anger. Compassion. He ran to his son, and then all the righteous people in the audience gasped and threw his arms around him and kissed him. And now everybody listening to Jesus' story is confused. Because those that had heard Jesus teach know that every time he goes into one of these crazy stories, somebody in the story represents you and somebody in the story represents God. And up until this point, I was pretty sure the father probably represented God, and this kid was about to get what he deserves because that's what all the tax gatherers and the sinners thought. Hey, live it up while I can, because if there is a God and if there is a judgment, it's not going to be good for me. And all the teachers of the law, the self-righteous, who were looking at the unrighteous, were thinking, hey, I deserve the good that's coming to me, and they deserve the bad that's coming to me, going to them. And suddenly, this father who I thought maybe represented God in this parable throws his arms around a stinking son who has done everything he could possibly do to offend and alienate and embarrass a father. And now everyone in Jesus' audience is confused because that's what Jesus did. Because he was the embodiment of grace and truth. And so the son starts his speech because he's rehearsed this all the way home. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, God, and you, my father. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And no one argues with that because that's absolutely true. But the father said to the son, so the father said to his servants, quick. Now this bothers me right here, the word quick. Because I think we would say, let's see where this is going. Let's see if he's sincere. Let's put him in a halfway house and just kind of work through this over time. Don't tell his mom he's back yet, because she'll get all graced out. You know, next thing you know, we're going to be having a party. So let's give this some time. Let's let this settle in. Let's see if he's really repentant, or maybe he just ran out of money. Maybe this is a jailhouse confession. Maybe this is like the criminal on the cross. It's like, I rededicate my life. Well, I guess you do. You have about a minute to live. I mean, how meaningful is that, right? And Jesus puts into the words, into the mouth of this father, quick, bring the best robe, put it on, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, which means my son is going to be my son. Oh yeah, and by the way, the fatted calf, I want you to bring the fatted calf. That's the one we've been saving for somebody's wedding or for a big celebration, or maybe, somebody graduates, or, we've been saving up for a big occasion. We've got an occasion in mind that we've been saving this calf for. Every time you say, hey, what are we fattening up the calf for? The family says, we're fattening that up for, because you fatten up a calf for a specific purpose. But forget that. Bring the fatted calf and let's have a feast and celebrate. Wait a minute. Now you've messed us all up. What? Now, if you grew up in Sunday school, this is where the story ended. If you've never been to church and you've heard the story of the prodigal son, this is probably the only part you've heard. But in the beginning, Jesus said there was a man who had how many sons? 2. And the behavior, the firstborn, the good guy, he's out doing what firstborn, good guy behaviors do. He's working. And he's finishing up his day. And he and his servants start heading back to the house, and there's like dancing, and there's dust, and there's music, and it looks like people are coming in from the community. And oh my gosh, somebody has killed the fatted calf. My dad's going to be so mad. Wait a minute, that's Frank pulling the wagon. What is going on? And that was for my graduation. That was for my wedding. That was for my birthday. And the servant comes running out, and he says, what's going on back at the house? And the servant says, oh, well, your brother's back. Really? I expected to see him on that cart, to be honest. Your brother's back, and your dad is killed. I hate to tell you this. The thing we've been waiting. He killed a fatted calf, and he's throwing a party, and he's invited everybody in the community, and he wants you to get cleaned up and come on in, celebrate. At which point, everyone in Jesus' audience identifies with the older brother. Because if my younger brother did that to my dad, I know how I would feel. And so Jesus says, let me just go ahead and put that word in your mouth. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. Let me ask you a question, then we're going to finish this up. Ever met any angry Christians? Ever grow up with an angry nun? Angry pastor? Ever watch television preachers and you go, he's just angry? Did you leave church because you were tired of being around angry, disputatious Christians? You ever feel like they're just mad at the world, and I don't know if they're jealous or I don't know what it is. It's like they believe in hell, and I think the reason they believe in hell, they're looking forward to hearing, seeing all that happen. What's up with those angry Christians? Why is it they're against everything? Why I feel like they're against me? And I know Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Did anyone tell them about that? He was angry, and he refused to go in. So let me kind of review. So now you got a dad who's thrown a party, invited the community. There's dancing and singing, so there's lots of people involved. He's killed a fatted calf. And on one side of the house is a son who doesn't feel like he deserves to come to the party. And on the other side of the house is his other son who agrees that his younger brother doesn't deserve to come to the party, and so neither of them want to be at the party. And so there's a dad that's like, I just want to have a celebration. Well, I don't deserve it. He's right, he doesn't deserve it. And if he's there, I'm not going. And I can't go because I don't deserve it. And everybody in Jesus' audience is so confused because none of them understood what God the Father is like, and none of them understand, like many of us don't understand, how God views sinners. And instead of just saying it, Jesus knew we wouldn't believe it. Jesus knew his audience wouldn't believe it. Jesus would, thought, how do I say this? Because I've got grace, I've got grace people who, there's just all that. And then I've got people who it's all the other. And I've got the self-righteous and the unrighteous. And he continues and he says, the older brother, he had a speech too. The younger brother had his speech. Here's the older brother's speech. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and he pleaded with him. He pleaded with him. Son, I know you're angry, but I want you to come to this party. And the older brother said, no, and here's why. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and I never disobeyed your orders. Now, can I mess with some of you just a bit? Do you know why you're an angry Christian? I don't care if you get mad at me, but let me tell you why you're angry. Because you think you deserve something from God that somebody else might get. You think you have been so faithful and so obedient, and you stayed in that marriage, and you disciplined your kids, and you tithed, and you did so many good things, and the holier you get, the angrier you get. And I'll tell you why. Because you're not this. And every time you hear about bad people and good things happen to them, it's like it deepens your belief in hell. Well, one day, and you find yourself secretly rejoicing about the fact that what goes around comes around, and you wish the parable had ended and he spent the rest of his life feeding the pigs, the end. Because you reap what you sow and you get what you deserve. And you're angry. And you're self-righteous. And you're not like Jesus. And you're not a very good follower. Now, you'll be a good Christian. Because I'm telling you, you can start a whole political party around that kind of Christianity. You can start a movement around that kind of Christianity. You can boycott around that kind of Christianity. But you're not like Jesus. I've been slaving for you, and I never disobeyed your orders. Yet, you never gave me a goat. Not even a goat. So I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, not my brother, who has squandered, as in thrown away, your property, Dad, you worked all your life, and it's gone in a second. He squandered your property with prostitutes. I hate to break it to you, Dad. I wasn't even going to tell you that. Don't tell Mom. Prostitutes, okay? You killed a fatted calf for him. And I'm mad. That bothers me. That's unjust. My son, the father says. You ready for this? You're always with me. What? You're always with me. Dad, did you just change the subject? Did you hear my speech? Did you sense the inequity? Did you hear what I said? Son, you're always with me. What does that have to do with anything? Son, shh. It has everything to do with everything. It's what I value the most. You've always been with me. And everything I have is yours. I'm not going to resplit up everything. It's not like he's going to get 25% again or 30% again. Son, shh, look. You're getting your reward. I haven't forgotten you. You're always with me. But we had to celebrate and be glad. Glad. Why? Well, because this brother of yours was dead to us. He wasn't with us. And now he's alive. He's with us. He was lost. I mean, we knew where he was, but he wasn't with us. Now he is found. He is with us. So I need you to come to the party. Not because he's getting what he deserves. This isn't about performance. This isn't about sowing and reaping. This is about proximity. He's back. He's back, and you never left. That's why I'm having this party. I don't know what you're so mad about. I don't even get the issue. All that stuff you just told me about working hard and you deserve, that's not what this is about. Now, you need to go talk to your brother because he's hung up on the same thing you are. You guys are exactly alike. You think this party is about performance. He didn't think he's good enough. You don't think he's good enough. That's not why I threw the party. I want to be with you. So come on in. Do you know what the root, the heart, the pull back the layers is when it comes to following Jesus? This is uncomfortable, but it'll change you, and it'll change us. I think it'll change the world. God could not love you more. And there's nothing you will do and nothing you could do that will cause him to love you less. And the corollary is this. Every person you're ever eyeball to eyeball with, God could not love more. And there's nothing they could do to cause God to love them less. Nothing. Let me put it this way. God never gets mad at lost things, ever.